Welcome to the Big Gunner Podcast. Well, the Giants are getting closer to minicamp that starts next week, actually on my birthday, which is kind of fun. And we'll get a good look and see how the reports are back to see how things look. So far, the OTAs worked out pretty well. No real injuries, good reports. Russell Wilson throwing a deep ball. Jackson Dart looks like he's getting acclimated. So in the quarterback room, we feel like we've made big improvements and big strides. And today we're going to talk about a couple things. And number one, what I really like to talk about before I get into the schedule, why I think the early part of the year is going to be important to get us off to a start to try to save the, the notion that we're going to keep Brian Dable and the front office intact. We don't want to get off to a really poor start. And then all of a sudden the fans start calling. We get distracted over what we're supposed to do, but the fans start calling for the firing of our guys. So I'm really hoping that the epic story, the start of this is good enough where we can put those conversations aside, move forward to the development of this football team, and then I'll break down what I think later in the season, why I think the schedule at the end of the year is probably to our benefit, where I think we can get games winning, and I think that's where Jackson Dart probably, if things aren't going great for Russell Wilson, that we don't have a playoff run in there where I think they might move on to Dart. One of the things I want to talk today is about, I got 5 key players that I feel have to step it up to either be on our roster moving forward or contribute to the success of this football team. I'll do this first before I get in the schedule, but the number 5 player that I have on my list, which probably other people would have ranked a little higher, is Kayvon Thibodeaux. I think Thibodeaux is going to get a little bit more of a break now with Abdul Carter being our first-round pick, being able to play a little bit on his side. I think Thibodeaux won't. I don't see Thibodeaux playing the same amount of plays as he played in the past, which might make him effective on passing downs. I just want to see how this develops. But I go back to the addition of Lawrence Taylor. When we got Lawrence Taylor coming in 1981, they found a way to get the guy in the field after camp that they weren't really projecting him to come in and have the impact he did. And then once they got a look at him, they saw the superior athleticism and the drive and the power in which he played at and said, we got to have to get this guy on the field and get him into a spot. So I'm hoping that happens with Carter, which would probably mean less reps for Thibodeaux. But in this particular case, Thibodeaux gets big plays in bunches, it seems like. I think 2 years ago when he had 11.5 sacks, I think he had 3-sack games and then kind of vanished a little bit. We're going to need a little bit more from him. Now, they went on the 5th-year option and decided to accept it, the Giants. So they feel like he should be a part of this team, moving forward. But I really think the pressure is going to be on him to perform. And I think if they find a way to move him inside, maybe on passing downs, get up against a guard, maybe expand the splits where the Burns and Carter can spread out the tackles, where maybe he can find creases in one-on-one in the interior, because Dexter Lawrence will demand a double team. So if you bring a 4-man rush like that and move Thibodeaux inside of Carter, you might see him up against a guard with better pass rushing technique, which might contribute to a little bit of success for him. But the numbers are going to have to be there. The pressure is going to have to be there. The plays that we're going to have to see him making some kind of an impact. So I think that's where I think my number 5 guy for the Giants' success is going to be, where is Kayvon Thibodeaux production midway, halfway through the season toward the end. And obviously we don't want to see him get injured. The number 4 guy is a guy I've been kind of hard on, but a lot of my friends have kind of been telling me I'm a little off base here, and that's Micah McFadden. Micah McFadden has a chance to get in front of the ball, but has a tendency to go backwards on impact. In other words, when he makes that contact, seems to get carried by the runner, but he makes tackles, and he's been good in the turnover department. Not good enough, but he's has created turnovers, a good guy when he gets to the ball. Fumble recoveries, causes fumbles. We love all that, but I want his tackling to get a little better. I know he missed a lot of tackles last year. I think it's a stat that we don't really emphasize, but he's got to be able to tackle in space, and I think production out of him or of a player, maybe it's Deonte Johnson, the player next to Bobby Okereke, has got to really contribute the numbers that Bobby Okereke does to help our line, because I think you're going to be able, with our line improvements, to have a little bit of freedom. Have a little bit of free reign. They're probably going to worry about other players other than yourself, so you might get plays where you go unblocked, and you should be able to make those plays in space. So that's my number 4 guy in Micah McFadden. My number 3 guy who could be higher is John Michael Schmitz. I think he's the key to a lot of our success offensively. I just think he's kind of underachieved, underperformed. I think as a leader in the center, I think this is a big year for him. I think it's his contract year. I think he has a 3-year deal. I'm not sure. But we're going to have to see him step up or bring in a center if it doesn't look good in camp, a veteran guy. Now, Van Roten came over after he got hurt a couple games and played okay, but I don't know if that's the real plan. But we're going to have to see, what we have in the center position if Schmitz he's got to step up. He to me is the key component. Staying healthy on the left tackle, obviously with Thomas, but having Schmitz there to solidify the line, the signal caller, all that stuff. He came out as an all Big Ten performer. I don't think he's played to that level. We're going to need him to really step up. He's a big key. The second one is a guy that everybody's high on. I was high on coming out, who's kind of been somewhat of a disappointment. And I only bring him in front of Schmitz because it's a skilled player. The guy who's probably our fourth wide receiver, and that's Jalin Hyatt. Guy who had 5 touchdowns in an Alabama game when Tennessee had probably one of their biggest wins in decades when they beat Alabama. And I saw him that day and said, boy, if we get our hands on him, and sure enough, we make a trade up to the third round. But I don't know what's happened. I think he's got great upbringing. I love his family. Something's missing with him, and I don't know if it's he doesn't get along with Dable, although that's not really widely reported, but you have to assume something like that. I just can't figure out why he's either not getting reps, what's happening in practice, does he get disenchanted, does he check out? But he better check in right now, because now with a professional quarterback like Russell Wilson, and we've seen videos of him catching touchdowns and being more involved in some of the OTAs, 7-on-7s and workings, I kind of want to see a little bit more out of Jalin Hyatt to see if not only does he make a roster, but can he produce as maybe stepping in for Slayton on a third wideout or maybe helping out Wan'Dale Robinson. We're going to get injuries, so he would be a guy that I expect to step up if one of our main 3 receivers go down, and take a roster spot. So, yeah, he's kind of like the forgotten man in my mind. I don't really put a lot of thought into him, but I just think that maybe this is the time for him to step up. And the number one guy, period, end discussion, has got to be Deonte Banks, the corner. I think he's been a complete disappointment. I was okay maybe a little bit in his rookie year, but I think now with Adebo and Holland and the arrival of Nubin, and I think he's got veteran players there that kind of can help him, guide him. He's not going to be the number one corner in the room. And I think this is what the Giants need to see, a big, big step up and improvement on Banks. And I think if those 5 guys do step up, I think we have a chance. I think we have a chance to be pretty good. That's kind of the guys that I feel like really that I'm looking at that I've kind of been shaky on, slightly disappointed in. And I think if they make strides, I think it helps out the entire base of the team. We know the main stars, the Burnses, the Neighbors, the Lawrences, these guys are going to be there. Andrew Thomas, when healthy, is a great player. So we have the nucleus of good star players of which to go and build a team around. But these are the 5 guys I feel that have to contribute, make the roster, find spots, be effective, and produce. So that's the kind of thing. And now if I can break into the schedule a little bit, I've talked about this enough. I go back to the 84 season when we started off after coming off a 3-12-1 season and opened up with Philly and Dallas. And, then we went down to Washington, who was the reigning NFC champion, and then we had, the Rams and the 49ers, and then, Tampa was in there, and then, Falcons. So we had like 6 of 7 playoff teams to start the season. And Parcells was always concerned about whether he was going to be around or not. I tell this story often, about me and him talking about this. And it's, it was just an important part for him to just get over this hump. And Brian Dable's in a very similar situation. The key factor is he doesn't get the first 2 games at home. But I really do like playing Washington on the road week 1, only because I just think the expectations in Washington are going to be so much higher for them this year. The getting to the NFC Championship game, getting blown out, getting this quarterback that they believe is the second coming. And it's a team that we've played reasonably well, and I think we'll have everybody healthy. And I think it's a really big game, an important game for us right away. I think the betting line I saw was 6.5. I would tendency with no injuries. I don't care what I see out of Washington in the preseason, but just being healthy, watching the continuity, seeing how it all blends in. And I don't need to see Russell Wilson a lot. I'd like to see him a couple series in the preseason just to get there. But I think we have enough to go down and not only cover that game and possibly win it. And then we go to Dallas in week 2, which, again, Brian Schottenheimer will be finding his way about his team. We could catch Dallas in a little. I think we'll probably be a 3.5 point underdog there, especially if we come off a win. If we got blown out, it'll be a lot worse. But, I kind of like our chances in these 2 games that I think they're possible wins. Now, because we were 0-6 in the division last year, now you have an opportunity to get a win or two. If you get 1-1 is even a good enough way to start too. But if we can avoid 0-2 and get a division win, I think that kind of starts the ball rolling. We have to go. And then we get the nationally televised game with Kansas City coming back in town. And who knows if they're sleeping. They're coming off a big game against Philly. You never know what you might catch. We'll probably be a 7-point underdog in that game, depending upon what happens, the Pat Mahomes thing. But if we could get some pressure, if we could find some problems on their offensive line and get rattled a little bit, get Mahomes a little uneasy, there's possibilities in that game too. And then, week 4, we come in with the Chargers. So the start is, if we could get 2-2 out of this start, I think it sets the tone for a real possibly big season. 1-3, you don't want 0-4 would probably be, now we'd start the Dable conversation. Is he going to be around? Who's ever? But the real thing is, just so everybody knows, if the Giants don't start 3-0, even the 2-1, they may be an underdog in all 4 games with the Chargers in week 4. And I think that's the real key component, is that the odds makers are going to say we're going to be 0-4. Now, the team total we see out there are 5.5s, and you kind of look at our roster and the addition of Russell Wilson, you kind of think that probably added a game to us. The success we had in the draft that everybody talked about, we were 4.5. I saw at one point, and went up to 5.5, which makes a lot of sense. So as we have those 4 games, and then in week 5 we head down to New Orleans. And that's a game that probably in any shape or form, no matter where we are, we got to think we can put a win on the board. If we're 0-4, we're going to be desperate. I think we're going to have a chance there. But if we're 2-2, that's a game to win. And then we got a short week and come home to Philly. That's going to be a very tough game, but it's going to be a game that I think we're going to be ready for. I don't know that we look past New Orleans, because we can't look past anybody. But I'm sure that Philly game is going to be well aware. And especially if we take the first 2 division games, we're having some success. It's going to be a game we're going to probably gear up for. And then we go out to Denver, and then that's going to be a really tough game, a playoff team going out there. We didn't have a lot of success, although we were 0-5, I think, or 7 or whatever. We went out there as like a 12-point underdog with Eli and ended up winning the last time I think we were there. So there's positives in that place too, that we've played okay there, but I think Denver's going to be kind of a problem. And then we go to Philly, which we all know that should be a problem, So we're kind of looking at a gauntlet to start the season with, 6 playoff teams and the Cowboys and the Saints in the first 8 games. So that's where I think that if we could somehow survive this, a 3-5, maybe a 4-4, then people will kind of believe in us. 2-6 would kind of still, I think, would probably bring heat on Brian Dable. It's just, we're just in a tough spot schedule-wise. And I heard a guy from Right Angle Sports, Adam Chernoff, talking about how unfair it is for the Giants to have the hardest schedule in the league by record. I think our win percentage is like 574 or something like that, some crazy number. But yet we're a 3-12 team. If you want parity, you kind of make us have an easy schedule. And then we play the last place team in the West, and it's the 49ers of all teams who come in week in week 9. Then we go out to Chicago, week 10, versus then Green Bay comes in week 11. Then we go out Detroit, week 12. I mean, this is just a heavy gauntlet schedule with 10 playoff teams in there. So I'm hoping we get off to a good start. We stay competitive. We have games that are meaningful at the end of November and early December. Then if it goes all right. But the end of the season, the last 6 weeks with a bye in week 14, is we have a New England on a Monday night game, which everybody thinks New England's going to be better, but I'm sure we think as we go on that's a winnable game. Then we have a bye. Then we have the Commanders at home, team that we have played well and talked about at week 1 getting them. We don't know where the situation is going to be then. Then the Vikings have given us problems recently, but we still beat them in a playoff game in Dable's first year. And then we go to Vegas, which who knows where Vegas is going to be, and home against the Cowboys, where we don't know where the Cowboys will be. So by the looks of it, you kind of have 3 out of the last 5 teams with teams coming off losing seasons. You have Washington, Minnesota that both made the playoffs last year. But I think the end of the season schedule could be something that we can work with. And it's at that point, I think, that if we get eliminated at the Detroit game or something like that, that you'll see Jackson Dart. So I'm going to say we're going to see Jackson Dart come in, I would say probably around week 12 or 13, if we're out of it. If it's going away early, and we see that Russell Wilson or Jamie, as we were playing, haven't been the quarterbacks that we expect, and I think you're going to see Dart a little earlier if Dable thinks it's job saving. And then if Jackson Dart produces and plays to the level that some of these guys did last year, then we win a few games we're not supposed to win. But I think that's what we're going to have to find. We're going to have to find a win against Philly, win against Washington early on, maybe a steal in a game against the Chargers or the Chiefs, something like that. Maybe stealing the game in Chicago. Because if you look at this schedule, I don't see a game that we're really favored in right now. We're not going to be favored at Washington at Dallas. We're not going to be favored at Kansas City Chargers. We might be around a pick 'em or one depending upon what happens in New Orleans. But I'd say right now, you might make New Orleans a small favorite. Philadelphia at home, we're not favored. At Denver, we're not favored. At Philly, we're not favored. Home against the 49ers, I would think the 49ers, just because of what's happened in recent years, would be a 3-point favorite at us. We're going to be our favorite on an underdog on the road at Chicago. Green Bay at home will be an underdog. I mean, every game, maybe New England, we might be a favorite earlier on, maybe, and then maybe at Vegas. But I don't see many games. So if you go by the price makers, we're going to be drafting number 1, 2, or 3 again, But I don't see it. I see us being competitive. I think if we're healthy, I go back to the Andrew Thomas factor. That in the last 2 years, we're 6-8 with him when he plays the complete game, which means we're basically competitive. And, that's kind of where I see, this going. All right, get over to the other side, the investment side of our podcast. And we're going to talk a little NHL playoffs last night. Lost on gave out on default the over. I thought Edmonton would have showed up last night and went over 2.5 goals in Edmonton. That was a loser. We won on the 2 baseball games on the Pirates and the Tampa Bay, so we were 2-1 on the board with Defoe yesterday. This is a real interesting game in Game 4 now. I kind of think the Panthers might have sent a message, so I think they possibly would go up 3-1. But if you had to take a game, if you think Edmonton's winning a series, this is the game you have to think that they bounce back. Panthers have a tendency to have that game after a big positive to sleepwalk through, go through one. So you'll see that, and you'll have a couple of a couple of different parts of this game where I think McDavid, the main line, Draisaitl will have to produce. I liked the low under a little bit, even though I bet over 2.5, thinking it would be a 3-2 game or something like that. Edmonton might have stolen the game last night. Didn't come about. I really kind of think that I kind of don't. I think the Panthers did send their message. I think the cup is theirs now. I was on Edmonton in 7, but I'll say that this is a do or die for Edmonton right now. As probably most people think in the gaming world that this would be a tough game. But I don't know that I bet it. I probably am going to watch it, but I think Panthers maybe a series bet, might be a small play now. But we're gonna have to see if this is if it was a real message that was sent to him or it was just one game. We'll have to see how that turns out. In the NBA, very interesting. Didn't see Game 1 coming. Liked OKC in 5. Still think it could happen, but OKC has yet to cover a game on the road. So if I'm taking a bet, I'm kind of looking at maybe the over. These games in Indiana, I think Indiana will have to play with a little bit more pace, get Halliburton a little bit more involved. I might like the 5.5 or the over. I think those are the 2 plays you contemplate tomorrow night. I'm going to probably give you right now. I think I got to see OKC cover a game on the road first. So the trend is 0-7. I'm going to take a 5.5 with Indiana in that game. I think the series still could be a short series, but if Indiana gets Game 3, I think we're going the distance. I really do. I think it's going to be tough, for, even if OKC would get Game 4, probably win Game 5 at home to win on the road at Indiana in Game 6. I think, that's going to be tough. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if it's 2-3-2, though. I probably should have researched that a little bit. But yeah, I think I think it's I think it's going to be a long series. If I would lose the bet, you're making in under 5.5 games. If Indiana gets a win, because you probably don't think Indiana's going to win in 5, but yeah, it's just the price is now 500. I don't know that I'd lay it at this point. I see a little bit more. Yeah, but it's pretty pretty interesting there. But I would take over just to see it. I want to take Indiana plus the 5.5 at home in Game 3. Major League Baseball, a couple plays today. I think the trend that we're seeing now, I think in 5 starts for Clayton Kershaw, is every game's gone over. I think later in the week when he gets a start, you might be able to see that. I like over 8.5 tonight with undecided against Dylan Cease. Cease has been struggling. Looks like the Dodgers found their bats, but Cease has had the struggles, and he struggled in the playoffs last year against the Dodgers. Kind of like the Dodgers, maybe the team total to go over. I think the price will probably be close to a pick 'em with an undecided starter coming in for the Dodgers. Look like it right now is Miller, and he's over 10 ERA. So I like the 8.5. I kind of like the Pirates again against Alcantara, Keller against Alcantara. Pirates yesterday, I think that's kind of another, duplicate bet today. You're laying 133 with Pittsburgh. And I like the Tampa Bay again. I think you stay with these teams early on in the series, then you'll get off them as the sweeps come. But I'm going to go with the over in the Dodgers game, the Pirates, and Tampa. Same as yesterday with the over the Dodgers game being the third play. And then we're going to come back with a little bit more for you next week. Again, the Giants, we start. We're going to do Tuesday to start a mini camp. We'll have a podcast before that. We'll try to see what we can find, some things to talk about. Maybe go back and get a couple of stories, from the old days. But yeah, so excited to wear the blue hat, getting ready. I feel like we're going to be a little better. Just again, gotta stay healthy. The number one thing with Big Blue is gotta stay healthy. Can't emphasize it enough. And got to get quality play out of the offensive line, which we had for the beginning part of the season until the injuries hit us. So, until next week, go Big Blue.